I sat in Dr. Martinez's waiting room, flipping through a magazine I wasn't really reading. My phone vibrated. My daughter Sarah's name appeared on the screen. Her voice had an edge I'd never heard before, distant, almost mechanical. "Mother, Thomas and I are flying to Italy tomorrow morning. I've already handled the sale of your cottage and the sedan. We required the funds immediately. Goodbye." The line went dead. 73 years on this earth and 50 years of motherhood reduced to a 30-second dismissal. But as I sat there among the coughing patients and worried faces, something unexpected happened. Instead of tears, I felt an eerie calm wash over me. My name is Margaret Hayes, and at that moment I realized my daughter didn't know me at all. My husband Charles had passed away 8 months prior. One moment he was pouring my morning tea, kissing my cheek with his usual, "Good morning, darling." The next, he collapsed. A massive stroke. The doctor said he felt nothing. Since Charles's death, Sarah had become almost suffocating in her attention. 3, sometimes 4, visits weekly. She organized the memorial service, drove me to appointments, even suggested this medical checkup. "Mother, you must prioritize your health now that you're alone," she'd say, with that smile I'd mistaken for devotion. The cottage had been our sanctuary. Charles and I purchased it when Sarah was 17, scraping together every penny. 30 summers spent there. Family traditions born between those walls. Sarah brought her boyfriends there, then Thomas. I cooked elaborate meals, laundered everyone's clothes, played the perfect hostess. Never did I imagine she'd view it as merely an asset to liquidate. And Charles's vintage Chevrolet, he'd maintained it religiously for 4 decades. Every Saturday morning ritual. The truck still carried his scent, his essence. Sarah understood what it represented. But what Sarah didn't know was that 3 days before his death, Charles had given me an envelope with very specific instructions, and I'd completely forgotten about it until now. What could possibly be inside that would change everything? The nurse called my name. Dr. Martinez examined me thoroughly, pronouncing me healthy for my age. "Just more rest and better nutrition, Mrs. Hayes." I nodded mechanically, but my mind was elsewhere. That envelope, hidden in my dresser drawer for 8 months. I left the clinic and waited at the bus stop. No car anymore, according to Sarah, but standing there, I couldn't suppress a slight smile. My daughter believed she'd stripped me of everything. She had no idea what Charles, my brilliant Charles, had actually left behind. The bus ride home felt surreal. I watched the city blur past. Shops, pedestrians, everyone carrying their own burdens. I had mine too, secrets that would soon surface. At home, I went straight to the bedroom. The manila envelope sat exactly where I'd placed it, beneath my winter scarves. My hands trembled as I lifted it. Charles's precise handwriting spelled out my name. I sat on our bed that now felt too large, and carefully opened it. Inside, legal documents, property deeds, investment certificates, and a handwritten letter in Charles's distinctive script. My vision blurred with tears. "My dearest Margaret," it began, "if you're reading this, I'm no longer beside you. Forgive me for keeping secrets, but I wanted to shield you from worry. Over the decades, I invested our modest savings. We don't just own the cottage. We own 6 additional properties, including the apartment complex where Sarah and Thomas reside. We also hold shares in 3 corporations worth more than you can fathom. You are wealthy, my darling. You always were in spirit, but now on paper as well." My hands shook as I examined each document. Properties scattered across different neighborhoods, a downtown condominium, a small inn along the coast. And yes, the 15-story building where my daughter lived rent-free, never knowing her father owned it through a shell company. Bank statements for accounts I'd never known existed, numbers that seemed impossible. Charles had driven buses for 42 years, but apparently he'd also been an investment genius. The irony was devastating. Sarah had abandoned me thinking we were destitute, when in reality we'd been millionaires all along. But why had Charles kept this secret even from me? And more importantly, what was I going to do about Sarah's betrayal? I couldn't sleep that night. I wandered through our house, touching Charles's belongings, studying family photographs. One image caught my attention: Sarah at age 6, perched on Charles's lap, giggling uncontrollably. Where had that joyful child gone? When did she transform into someone so calculating? The next morning, Sarah called again. Her voice had softened, but I'd learned to distrust these tonal shifts. "Mother, checking in. We've transferred your portion from the cottage and car sales. It's deposited in your account. Not substantial, but enough for several months while you search for something more economical." "My portion?" I kept my voice steady. "Yes, Mother." "Obviously, we couldn't leave you with nothing. We gave you 35%. Fair, wouldn't you say? Thomas has this incredible opportunity in Italy. We need the investment capital." She paused. "We're flying out this evening." "Perhaps 6 months abroad, maybe longer if the venture succeeds. But don't worry. When we return, we'll help you locate a small apartment. Something appropriate. Appropriate. As though she understood my needs. Safe travels, Sarah. "Oh, Mother, I knew you'd understand. You've always been so accommodating. We love you tremendously." Click. I stood holding the phone, and then I laughed. Actually laughed. Something I hadn't done since Charles died. The absurdity was almost comedic. My daughter had stolen from me, patronized me, discarded me, all to fund what would probably be a disastrous European fantasy. But the money wasn't what wounded me. It was the ease with which she'd erased me from her life. 5 decades of sacrifice, unconditional love, and she'd deleted me with a brief phone call. I checked my bank account online. They'd deposited what they probably considered generous. To me, it was insulting. They'd sold the cottage far below market value, desperate for quick cash. Charles's truck went for a pittance. That afternoon, from my window, I watched Sarah and Thomas load luggage into a taxi. Designer bags, expensive coats, champagne smiles. They never glanced toward my window. No goodbye. When the taxi disappeared, I made tea and spread Charles's documents across the kitchen table. I could call a lawyer immediately, reclaim everything, destroy them legally. But something told me there was a better approach, one that would teach Sarah a lesson she'd never forget. First, though, I needed to let her think she'd won. I couldn't sleep that night. I wandered through our house, touching Charles's belongings, studying family photographs. One image caught my attention: Sarah at age 6, perched on Charles's lap, giggling uncontrollably. Where had that joyful child gone? When did she transform into someone so calculating? The next morning, Sarah called again. Her voice had softened, but I'd learned to distrust these tonal shifts. "Mother, checking in. We've transferred your portion from the cottage and car sales. It's deposited in your account. Not substantial, but enough for several months while you search for something more economical." "My portion?" I kept my voice steady. "Yes, Mother." "Obviously, we couldn't leave you with nothing. We gave you 35%. Fair, wouldn't you say? Thomas has this incredible opportunity in Italy. We need the investment capital." She paused. "We're flying out this evening." "Perhaps 6 months abroad, maybe longer if the venture succeeds. But don't worry. When we return, we'll help you locate a small apartment. Something appropriate. Appropriate. As though she understood my needs. Safe travels, Sarah. "Oh, Mother, I knew you'd understand. You've always been so accommodating. We love you tremendously." Click. I stood holding the phone, and then I laughed. Actually laughed. Something I hadn't done since Charles died. The absurdity was almost comedic. My daughter had stolen from me, patronized me, discarded me, all to fund what would probably be a disastrous European fantasy. But the money wasn't what wounded me. It was the ease with which she'd erased me from her life. 5 decades of sacrifice, unconditional love, and she'd deleted me with a brief phone call. I checked my bank account online. They'd deposited what they probably considered generous. To me, it was insulting. They'd sold the cottage far below market value, desperate for quick cash. Charles's truck went for a pittance. That afternoon, from my window, I watched Sarah and Thomas load luggage into a taxi. Designer bags, expensive coats, champagne smiles. They never glanced toward my window. No goodbye. When the taxi disappeared, I made tea and spread Charles's documents across the kitchen table. I could call a lawyer immediately, reclaim everything, destroy them legally. But something told me there was a better approach, one that would teach Sarah a lesson she'd never forget. First, though, I needed to let her think she'd won. The following weeks were the strangest of my life. Publicly, I was a poor widow abandoned by her daughter. Privately, I was a wealthy woman, silently orchestrating the recovery of my assets. Mr. Harrison worked efficiently. Every few days he'd call with updates. Meanwhile, I maintained my routine. I stayed in my house. It was mine, after all, though Sarah probably expected me to move into a single room somewhere. Each morning, I'd have breakfast at the table Charles and I had shared for decades, then walk through the neighborhood. Neighbors greeted me with that mixture of pity and curiosity reserved for recent widows. My neighbor Patricia stopped me one afternoon while I was watering the front garden. "Margaret, dear, is it true Sarah went to Italy and left you completely alone?" "Yes, Patricia. She and Thomas have business ventures there. And how will you manage financially?" Everyone knows Charles didn't leave much money. If you only knew, I thought. Don't worry about me, Patricia. I'll be fine. Do you need anything? I can bring groceries, help with shopping. That's very kind, but I'm managing. Patricia studied me with that expression I'd seen repeatedly since the funeral. Compassion mixed with relief that it wasn't her tragedy. These conversations repeated constantly. The butcher, the pharmacist, the woman at the corner market. Everyone spoke to me in those soft tones reserved for the unfortunate. I'd nod, smile, thank them for their concern. But internally, I was enjoying this performance. It was like living a double life. Mr. Harrison called one Wednesday morning. "Mrs. Hayes, excellent news. I've nullified the cottage sale. The buyers didn't know it was fraudulent, so they were reimbursed without issues. The property is yours again." "Excellent, Mr. Harrison." "And the building where Sarah lives?" "That's more complex. Technically, you've always owned it through the shell company, but we need to make administrative changes so you have direct control. Another 2 weeks." "Perfect. Keep me informed." After hanging up, I sat with my coffee and thought about Sarah. 3 weeks in Italy, and I hadn't heard from her. Not one call, not one message, not even a postcard. To her, I'd ceased to exist the moment she got the money, but I knew that was about to change. Mr. Harrison had just informed me that Thomas had taken out massive loans using their apartment as collateral, not knowing he didn't own it. When the banks discovered the truth, Sarah's perfect life was going to crumble, and I was going to let it happen. I decided to visit the cottage. I took the bus along the coast, the same route Charles and I had traveled hundreds of times. The house looked exactly as I remembered, small, cream-colored, with a porch overlooking the ocean. An elderly gentleman emerged from the house and noticed me sitting across the street. "Are you all right, ma'am?" "Yes, thank you, just reminiscing. I knew the previous owners quite well." "Ah, yes, unfortunate situation. They told us the elderly woman was severely ill and needed to sell quickly. We thought we got a bargain, but turns out the sale wasn't legal. Had to return the house." "Did you know them personally?" "No." Everything went through intermediaries. They said the daughter was handling everything because the mother was incapacitated. Such a sad situation. If you only knew how sad, I thought. Well, I'm glad you didn't lose your money. Yes, fortunately it worked out, though now we need to find another house. We really love this one. I left with a heavy heart. It wasn't just the money that hurt. It was how easily Sarah had lied about me. She'd fabricated a story about my illness, used my supposed vulnerability to justify her actions. That night, Mr. Harrison called again. "Mrs. Hayes, I have information. Your daughter just arrived back in the country, at the airport, alone." Alone? Yes. Apparently, Thomas remained in Italy. Rumors suggest they had a significant argument. I see. Did you send the letter? I'm sending it today. She should receive it tomorrow. I hung up feeling a mixture of nervousness and anticipation. After weeks of silent planning, the moment for the first real move had arrived. Sarah was about to discover that her mother wasn't the defenseless victim she'd believed. The next evening, Patricia rushed over with neighborhood gossip. "Margaret, your daughter came back last night. I saw her enter with one suitcase looking terrible. Pale, dark circles, as if she'd cried the entire flight. Completely alone." Alone? Yes. And something strange. When the doorman asked for her keys, she didn't have them. She had to ask the superintendent for the emergency copy. Thomas had the keys, which meant he'd probably decided not to return. Or maybe Sarah had discovered something about him and fled. Either way, my daughter was back, and very soon she'd receive my little welcome gift, an eviction notice from a company she'd never heard of. The game was accelerating. Sarah called the next morning at 8 o'clock. Her voice sounded frantic. Mother, I need to speak with you urgently." "Good morning, darling." "How was Italy?" "Mother, I don't have time for pleasantries. I received a very strange letter yesterday. It says I must vacate my apartment within 30 days. This must be an error, right? Do you know anything about this?" "An eviction notice? How peculiar. From whom?" "From a company I've never heard of. It's called... Wait, let me find the letter. Charles Investments, LLC. Do you know this company?" Charles had used his own name. How poetic. "No, darling. I've never heard that name. Are you certain the letter is legitimate?" "That's what I'm trying to determine. Mother, I need your help. I don't know what to do. Thomas left me in Italy. He ran off with another woman, and now I return to this. I don't understand what's happening. There was the confirmation. Thomas had abandoned her, probably when the money ran out or when he realized the legal problems at home were more serious than he'd thought. I'm so sorry, darling. Where are you now?" "I'm in the apartment, but I don't know for how long. Mother, can I come see you? I need to talk to someone. I don't have anyone else." The irony was perfect. Now that she was left without the man for whom she'd abandoned me, she remembered she had a mother. "Of course, darling. Come whenever you wish. I'm on my way." I hung up and examined myself in the mirror. I had to be perfect for this performance. I put on my most conservative gray dress, tied my hair in a simple bun, practiced my expression of a worried but resigned mother. When Sarah arrived, she'd see exactly what she expected: a poor, vulnerable widow who'd been abandoned by her own daughter. Sarah arrived within an hour. When I opened the door, I was startled by her appearance. She'd lost significant weight, had deep shadows under her eyes, and her expensive clothes looked wrinkled and unkempt. Her eyes were red from crying. "Mother," she said, and for a moment I thought she'd hug me, but she stopped as if suddenly remembering how things had ended between us. "Come in, darling. Would you like coffee?" "Yes, please." We sat in the kitchen at the same table where I'd read Charles's documents weeks ago. Sarah looked small in that chair, lost just like when she was a child coming to tell me about school problems. "Mother, I'm so sorry for how I left. I know I didn't treat you well. It's in the past, darling." "No, it's not. I treated you horribly. I said awful things. And now," her voice broke, "now I have no one. What happened with Thomas? And more importantly, should I tell her the truth now or let her suffer a little longer?" As I watched my broken daughter cry at my kitchen table, I had to make a choice that would define our relationship forever. "He left with a 26-year-old hotel worker in Rome," Sarah said, wiping her tears. "It turns out there was never any business in Italy. It was all a lie. He just wanted to escape the debts he had here and use the money from selling your cottage to fund his adventure." "All the debts?" "Yes, Mother. So many debts. It seems he'd been taking out loans for years, using our apartment as collateral. But now I find out he wasn't the actual owner of the apartment. How is that possible?" Here was my opportunity. "I don't know, darling." Property matters are very complicated. The problem is the banks are now coming after me for his debts. They say since we were married, I'm also responsible. And on top of that, this eviction notice. "Mother, I don't know what to do. I don't have money. I don't have a job. I don't have anywhere to live." She started crying again. Real tears of genuine desperation. For a moment, my maternal heart softened. I wanted to hug her, comfort her, tell her everything would be okay. But then I remembered the coldness in her voice when she'd called me from the doctor's office, the ease with which she'd discarded me, the way she'd talked to me as if I were a burden. "Did you consult a lawyer about the letter?" "I don't have money for a lawyer, Mother." "We spent everything in Italy. Thomas took what little remained when he ran off with that woman." "So what are you going to do?" "I don't know. I thought maybe I could stay with you for a while, just until I find a job and can afford a small place to live." There it was, the question I'd been waiting for. After kicking me out of my own house, after selling my belongings, after treating me like garbage, she now wanted me to rescue her. She wanted the poor widow she'd created to save her from the consequences of her own actions. "Of course, darling. This will always be your home." Sarah looked at me with surprise, as if she hadn't expected it to be so easy. "Really, Mother? After everything that happened? You're my daughter, Sarah." "That will never change." She stood and hugged me. It was a desperate embrace from someone drowning and clinging to the only thing they can find. I hugged her back too, but not with the unconditional love from before. Now there was calculation in my embrace. Strategy. "Thank you, Mother. I promise I'll find work soon. I won't be a burden. Don't worry about that now. Rest, recover, and then we'll see what your options are." Sarah left that afternoon to collect some things from her apartment. I stayed in the kitchen thinking about how easy it had been. She'd come to me exactly as I'd planned. Broken, desperate, with no options. And best of all, she suspected nothing. To her, I was still the poor, abandoned mother who needed her compassion. But this was only the first part of my plan. Having her live with me would give me the perfect opportunity for the next phase. I was going to let her settle in, feel safe, believe she'd found refuge in my home. And then, when she least expected it, I was going to teach her the real lesson. But first, I needed to know. Could I really go through with this? Sarah moved in the next day. She arrived with 2 suitcases and a cardboard box, all that remained of her previous life. I watched her unpack in her childhood bedroom, and I could see the humiliation in every movement. She'd gone from living in a luxury condo to seeking refuge in her teenage bedroom. "Mother, I found this in the apartment," she said, showing me a manila envelope. "It was among Thomas's belongings. It has your name on it." My heart raced, but I maintained composure. "My name?" "Yes, look." She showed me the envelope. Indeed, it had my name in Charles's handwriting, but this envelope was different from the one in my dresser. This one was smaller, newer. Maybe Thomas found it among Dad's things when he died and forgot to give it to you, Sarah suggested. Possible. May I see it? I opened the envelope in her presence. Inside was a short letter and a small key. The letter read, "Margaret, if you're reading this after receiving the main envelope, it means our daughter is experiencing difficulty. This key opens safety deposit box 347 at Central Bank downtown. There's something there that can help you help her, but use it wisely. With eternal love, Charles." Sarah read over my shoulder. A safety deposit box? Dad had a safety deposit box? I had no idea. Neither did I lied. Do you think we should see what's inside? I don't know, darling. Perhaps it's better to leave things as they are. But Mother, maybe there's something important. Documents or, I don't know, maybe something valuable that could help us. The desperation in her voice was palpable. Sarah was clinging to any possibility of finding a way out of her situation. "All right," I said after a calculated pause. "We can go tomorrow." That night, Sarah cooked dinner, trying to be useful. The food tasted of guilt and desperation. She told me more details about Italy, and each story was worse than the last. "Thomas lied about everything, Mother. Not just the business, but the debts, too. I thought he only owed a little money, but it turns out he owes over $90,000. And the worst part is he used my name for some loans without my knowledge." "How is that possible?" "He forged my signature. When I married him, I gave him some documents to handle our joint banking. I never thought he'd use them for this." "Do you have any way to prove you didn't know?" "I don't know. It's all so complicated. The banks say since we were married, I'm responsible for all his debts anyway." "And the divorce?" "I don't even know where Thomas is now." "He just disappeared. His phone is disconnected. He doesn't answer emails. Nothing. It's as if he vanished." Perfect. Thomas had run away like the coward he'd always been, leaving Sarah to face the consequences alone. The next day, we'd go to that safety deposit box, and Sarah would find something that would give her hope. Just enough hope to make the final revelation even more powerful. But I was starting to wonder, was I being cruel, or was I being the mother she actually... The next day, we went to the bank. Sarah was nervous, hopeful. I maintained my act as a confused widow who didn't understand much about finance. The bank employee led us to the safety deposit boxes, verified my identification, and opened box 347. Inside were jewels. Many jewels. Rings, necklaces, bracelets, earrings. I recognized some pieces as heirlooms from Charles's family. Others were completely new to me. There was also a letter explaining the origin of each piece and its approximate value. Sarah gasped, "Mother, this must be worth a fortune." "You think so?" "Yes, look at this emerald, this pearl necklace. Mother, Dad saved a treasure here." According to Charles's letter, the jewels were worth approximately $180,000. It was a significant amount, but nothing compared to the rest of my assets. It was like finding spare change under the sofa when you have $1 million in the bank. "What do we do with this, Mother?" "I don't know, darling. They're family memories. But Mother, we could sell some pieces. With this money, you could get your cottage back, and I could pay off some of Thomas's debts." There it was again. Even when finding something valuable, Sarah's first reaction was to think about solving Thomas's problems. She hadn't learned anything yet. Over the next few days, Sarah decided to sell most of the jewels, keeping only my engagement ring and a small necklace that had belonged to her grandmother. It was painful watching her reduce decades of family history to commercial transactions. "Mother, I got $170,000 for the jewels," she told me one afternoon. "It's less than expected, but enough to pay off the most urgent debts." "Are you sure you want to do this?" "I have no choice. If I don't pay something soon, they'll foreclose on everything." How ironic. Sarah was worried about losing a house I owned, paying debts of a man who'd abandoned her, with money from jewels that had belonged to the man who'd created a fortune that could save her. But then something shifted. Sarah came home one evening with news. "Mother, I went to 3 job interviews today. 2 told me they can't hire me because of the pending legal problems. The 3rd offered me a part-time job cleaning offices at night. Are you going to take it?" "I have no choice. It pays very little, but it's better than nothing, and I can work at night so I can keep looking for something better during the day." Seeing my daughter, who'd lived comfortably for over 40 years, preparing to clean offices at night broke my heart, but it also filled me with pride. She was finally facing reality without expecting someone else to solve her problems. Maybe, just maybe, she was learning the lesson I needed her to learn. But was it time to end this charade, or should I let her struggle a little longer? One night, while Sarah was on her first cleaning shift, Patricia came to visit. She sat in my kitchen, drinking tea and looking at family photos on the walls. "Margaret, I have to ask you something. Did you know Sarah was going to come back in these conditions?" "What do you mean?" "Well, when she left, she seemed so confident, so arrogant. She talked about the great life she'd have in Italy, about how successful Thomas was. And now she's back, completely broken, working a cleaning job, living with you again." "Life takes many turns, Patricia." "Yes, but there's something else. I've been watching Sarah these past days, and she looks different, not just sad, but humble, as if she learned something important. Patricia had always been perceptive. What do you think she learned?" "I think she learned the value of things she took for granted, like having a mother who loves her unconditionally." "Perhaps." "Margaret, can I tell you something? When Sarah left and treated you so badly, many of us thought you'd never forgive her. But here you are, taking care of her again, giving her a home when she has nowhere to go." "She's my daughter, Patricia." "Yes, but not every mother would do what you're doing, especially after being treated the way you were." If Patricia only knew the complete truth, that I had the power to solve all of Sarah's problems, but was choosing to let her suffer so she'd learn the full lesson. After weeks of working, Sarah came home one night with a new expression, not just tired, but dignified. Hard, but not as bad as I thought. The other women who worked there helped me a lot. One of them, Mrs. Chen, taught me tricks to clean more efficiently. "Mrs. Chen?" "Yes. She's 62 and has been cleaning offices for 23 years. She told me she started after her husband left her with 3 small children. She says it's not the job she dreamed of, but it gave her independence and dignity." "She sounds like a wise woman." "She is." She said something that made me think. She told me there are 2 types of people who end up doing this job: those who are there because they never had opportunities, and those who are there because they ruined the opportunities they had. She asked me which group I was in. "What did you tell her?" I told her the truth, that I had all the opportunities in the world, a family that loved me, a stable home and inheritance, and I ruined it all by following a worthless man. What did she say? She laughed and said, "Well, honey, then at least you know exactly why you're here." That puts you one step ahead of most people. Sarah sat with me at the table. "Mother, I want you to know something. These past weeks have been the hardest of my life, but also the most important." "Why?" "Because I finally understand what really matters. It's not money. It's not living in the most luxurious apartment. It's having people who genuinely love you, who are there when everything falls apart." She was so close to understanding the full truth, but there was still one more lesson she needed to learn before I could reveal everything. Mr. Harrison had just called with news about Thomas's debts, and I had to decide, was now the right time to show Sarah that she'd never been alone? Mr. Harrison called me one Friday morning. "Mrs. Hayes, I have excellent news. The legal process is almost complete. We can clear your daughter of all of Thomas's debts. It was time. After weeks of watching Sarah struggle, work, and reflect on her mistakes, the moment had finally arrived to show her the truth. "Mr. Harrison, I want you to organize a meeting. It's time for my daughter to know everything." He arranged the meeting for Friday morning at his office. I told Sarah I'd made an appointment with a lawyer who could help with her legal problems, but I didn't explain the details. "Mother, I don't have money to pay a lawyer. I barely have enough to cover basic expenses. Don't worry about that now, darling. Let's just hear what he has to say." We arrived at Mr. Harrison's office on time. Sarah had dressed in her best clothes, which now looked a little large on her thinner body. She was nervous, wringing her hands, expecting another piece of bad news. "Mrs. Hayes, Miss Hayes, thank you for coming," Mr. Harrison greeted us. "Thank you for seeing us," Sarah replied, "although I should warn you that my financial situation is very complicated, and I probably can't afford high fees." "That's exactly what we're going to discuss," Mr. Harrison said, exchanging a look with me. "But first, I need you to review these documents." He handed Sarah a thick folder. She opened it and began reading, her expression gradually changing from confusion to surprise. "I don't understand. These documents say Thomas forged my signature, that there's evidence of fraud, that I'm not responsible for the debts." "That's correct. We've been investigating your case for the past several weeks. We found enough evidence to prove you were a victim of identity fraud." "But how is this possible?" "Who paid for this investigation? I don't have money for this." Mr. Harrison looked at me. It was my moment. "Sarah, there's something I need to tell you." "What, Mother?" I took a deep breath. "Your father left me more than you knew. Much more." "What do you mean?" "Mr. Harrison, show her the other documents." He took out a second folder and handed it to Sarah. This time, the documents were property deeds, bank statements, investment certificates, the entire fortune Charles had built in secret. Sarah read in silence for several minutes. Her face went through a complete range of emotions: confusion, disbelief, shock, and finally comprehension. "Mother, this says you own the building where I lived." "Yes, and that you have other properties, bank accounts, investments." "Yes, this means when I sold the cottage, it was my cottage, and the sale was fraudulent. I already got it back." Sarah stared at the papers, trying to process everything. "How long have you known this?" "Since the day you called me from the doctor's office." "You knew all this when I came back from Italy asking for help?" "Yes. You knew you could solve all my problems when you saw me crying every night." "Yes." There was a long, tense silence. Sarah closed the folders and looked directly into my eyes. "Why, Mother? Why did you let me suffer when you could have helped me?" This was the question I'd been waiting weeks to answer. But would she understand? Would she forgive me? Or had I destroyed our relationship forever? "Because you needed to learn something you couldn't learn any other way," I said quietly. "What?" Sarah's voice trembled. "You needed to learn the value of what you'd lost. The value of family, of respect, of responsibility. When you abandoned me, it wasn't just money you took. It was dignity. It was love. It was trust." Sarah started crying, but these weren't tears of self-pity like before. These were tears of deep understanding. "I abandoned you when you needed me most. Yes. I treated you like you were nothing. Yes. And you saved me anyway. Yes, but not in the way you expected. I didn't save you by giving you money so you could continue making the same mistakes. I saved you by letting you hit rock bottom so you could learn to save yourself." Mr. Harrison discreetly intervened. "Miss Hayes, your mother has paid all legal expenses to free you from Thomas's debts. She's also recovered all properties that were sold fraudulently. You're completely free of legal problems." Sarah wiped her tears and looked at me with an expression I hadn't seen in years. It wasn't the look of a daughter who needs her mother. It was the look of a woman who respects another woman. "And the cleaning job I got?" she asked quietly. "You can quit if you want," I said, "but I hope you don't." "Why?" "Because that job is teaching you something you never learned when everything was easy. It's teaching you the value of your own effort, the dignity of honest work, the importance of valuing every dollar you earn." Sarah stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she turned back to me. "Do you forgive me, Mother? I forgave you a long time ago, darling. The question is, can you forgive yourself? I don't know if I can. I did unforgivable things. People make mistakes, Sarah. The important thing is what we do after we recognize those mistakes." Mr. Harrison left us alone in his office. Sarah and I sat in silence, processing everything that had happened. "Mother, I want you to know something," Sarah finally said. "Even if you didn't have all this money, even if you were really the poor widow I thought you were, I would have learned the same lesson." "What lesson?" "That there's nothing more valuable than having someone who loves you unconditionally." During these past weeks, the only thing that kept me sane was knowing I had a home with you, that no matter how much I'd ruined my life, you were still my mother. That will never change, Sarah. I know, but I also know I can never take that love for granted again. I have to earn it every day, with respect, with gratitude, with actions, not just words. We left Mr. Harrison's office with a completely new relationship. We were no longer mother and daughter united only by blood and habit. We were two women who had chosen each other after going through the most difficult test imaginable. As we walked out into the sunlight, Sarah turned to me and asked one more question. "What do we do now, Mother?" I smiled, because I finally had an answer that would honor both Charles's memory and the lesson Sarah had learned. But first, she needed to make one more decision on her own. The following weeks were about rebuilding, but not the kind Sarah expected. Even though she now knew I had enough resources to solve all her problems, she made an unexpected decision. "Mother, I need to finish what I started," she told me one evening as she prepared for work. "I can't just go back to a comfortable life as if nothing happened." "Are you sure?" "You don't have to punish yourself forever. It's not punishment. It's a way of remembering who I was and who I want to be now. Mrs. Chen depends on me now. She's training me to supervise the night crew. If I quit, she loses her bonus. I watched her put on her work uniform, something unthinkable months ago. But there was dignity in her posture now, confidence that came from earning her own way. Patricia visited that afternoon with neighborhood gossip. "Margaret, there are strange rumors circulating." "What kind of rumors?" "People are saying you're not as poor as we all thought." Someone saw Sarah leaving an elegant lawyer's office downtown and then paying off all her debts at the bank. That cost serious money, Margaret. Patricia knew me too well to fool her forever. "What do you want to know exactly?" "I want to know if my friend of 42 years has been deceiving me about her situation." I poured tea and sat across from her. It was time to be honest with someone else. "Charles left me more than anyone knew, Patricia. Much more." "How much more?" "Enough that Sarah and I never have to worry about money again." "And why did you pretend to be poor all these months?" I told her everything. Sarah's cruel phone call, my plan, the weeks of watching her struggle, and finally the revelation. "Margaret, that's brilliant and terrible at the same time." "Yes, because you let your own daughter suffer when you could have helped immediately. But also brilliant because I understand why you did it. Sarah needed to learn the value of what she'd lost." "Exactly." "But Margaret, didn't it hurt you to see her suffer?" every single day. Every night I heard her crying. Every morning I watched her leave for work, exhausted and defeated. But I knew if I rescued her too soon, she wouldn't learn the full lesson. And do you think she learned it? Look for yourself. Sarah now has access to enough money to live comfortably, but she chose to keep her job. She knows she can move to a better place, but she decided to stay here with me. She knows she doesn't have to worry about debts, but she's using her own savings to help other women in similar situations. She's helping other women? Yes. She became friends with the ladies she works with and is using money she earned cleaning offices to help a coworker pay for her daughter's medical treatment. Patricia smiled. That's not the Sarah who went to Italy. No, it's not. That night, Sarah came home with news. Mother, Mrs. Chen asked me today if I was the daughter of the wealthy lady from the North Side. I told her yes. She asked why I was still working. So I explained that I needed to prove to myself that I could stand on my own feet. What did she say? She laughed and said, Honey, that's the difference between being rich and acting rich. Your mother taught you how to be truly rich. Sarah sat with me on the sofa. Mother, I've made a decision. I'm going to keep living here with you, but not as a daughter who's come back to her parents' house. I want to stay as an adult woman who chooses to share her life with her mother. What's the difference? The difference is I'm going to pay my share of expenses. I'm going to contribute to maintaining the house. I'm going to treat this relationship as a partnership between two independent women who love and respect each other. Sarah, you don't need to. Yes, I do. I need our relationship to be different from what it was before. Before, I was a daughter who took her mother's love for granted. Now I want to be an adult who values the most important relationship in her life. And your job? I'm going to keep working, but not necessarily cleaning offices forever. I want to go back to school. I want to prepare myself to do something more meaningful. But I want to do it step by step, earning every opportunity. Do you have any idea what you want to study? Yes. Social work. These past weeks have taught me how many people are going through difficult situations without anyone to support them. I want to use the resources we have to help other women going through what I went through. It was perfect. Sarah had not only learned to value what she had, she'd found a way to use her experience for something constructive. But there was still one more piece to complete this journey. I was about to propose something that would honor Charles's memory in the most beautiful way possible. I decided it was time to revisit the cottage. Sarah and I drove there together one Sunday morning, the first time since I'd recovered it. As we pulled up, Sarah remained in the truck for a moment, staring at the house where we'd spent so many family summers. It looks exactly the same, she said finally. Some things don't change, but people do. I'm not the same person who sold this house, Mother. We went inside together. The house was clean and preserved, exactly as Charles and I had kept it for years. Sarah walked through each room, touching furniture, looking at family photos on the walls. Mother, I need to apologize. You already apologized, darling. No, I need to apologize specifically for this house. Not just for selling it, but for reducing all our family memories to a commercial transaction. It's forgiven. This house represents 30 years of family summers, birthdays, holidays. Dad built that porch with his own hands. You planted that garden. I learned to swim at that beach. And I turned it all into money to fund an adventure with a worthless man. She sat on the sofa where Charles used to read on Sunday mornings. Do you know what hurts me most? What? That when I sold it, I didn't feel anything. It was just another property. Now, being here again, I can feel Dad in every corner. I can hear his laughter, smell his morning coffee, see his reading glasses on the table. He is here, Sarah. He's always been here. I know, and I also know he's proud of how you handled all of this. We spent the day at the cottage, cooking together, cleaning, fixing small details. It was like a ritual of reconnection, not just with the place, but with the values that place represented. When sunset approached, we sat on Charles's porch, looking at the ocean. "Mother, I have a proposal." "What is it?" "I want us to turn this house into a temporary shelter for women leaving situations of domestic violence, a place where they can stay while they rebuild their lives." It was perfect. Charles would have loved the idea that his cottage would serve to help other families. "I think that's a beautiful idea, darling. We can use some of the foundation's resources to maintain it, and I can oversee the program through my social work studies. Are you sure you want to turn our family sanctuary into that?" "The best sanctuaries are the ones that are shared. Your father always said a house isn't truly a home until it opens its doors to people who need love." He was right. We drove home that evening with a new project and a completely renewed relationship. We were no longer mother and daughter united by obligation or need. We were two women who had consciously chosen to build a life together based on love, respect, and common purpose. That night, before falling asleep, I spoke to Charles in silence. "We did it, my love. Our daughter finally understands what truly matters." And for the first time since his death, I felt he answered me. "I always knew you would. You're both stronger than you think." 6 months had passed since that phone call in the doctor's waiting room. Sarah had transformed completely, and so had I. But there was still one final chapter to this story, one that would bring everything full circle and show Sarah the ultimate lesson about family, forgiveness, and the true meaning of wealth. I decided it was time to revisit the cottage. Sarah and I drove there together one Sunday morning, the first time since I'd recovered it. As we pulled up, Sarah remained in the truck for a moment, staring at the house where we'd spent so many family summers. "It looks exactly the same," she said finally. "Some things don't change, but people do. I'm not the same person who sold this house, Mother." We went inside together. The house was clean and preserved, exactly as Charles and I had kept it for years. Sarah walked through each room, touching furniture, looking at family photos on the walls. "Mother, I need to apologize." "You already apologized, darling." "No, I need to apologize specifically for this house. Not just for selling it, but for reducing all our family memories to a commercial transaction. It's forgiven. This house represents 30 years of family summers, birthdays, holidays. Dad built that porch with his own hands. You planted that garden. I learned to swim at that beach, and I turned it all into money to fund an adventure with a worthless man." She sat on the sofa where Charles used to read on Sunday mornings. "Do you know what hurts me most?" "What?" "That when I sold it, I didn't feel anything. It was just another property. Now, being here again, I can feel Dad in every corner. I can hear his laughter, smell his morning coffee, see his reading glasses on the table. He is here, Sarah. He's always been here. I know. And I also know he's proud of how you handled all of this." We spent the day at the cottage, cooking together, cleaning, fixing small details. It was like a ritual of reconnection, not just with the place, but with the values that place represented. When sunset approached, we sat on Charles's porch, looking at the ocean. "Mother, I have a proposal." "What is it?" "I want us to turn this house into a temporary shelter for women leaving situations of domestic violence, a place where they can stay while they rebuild their lives." It was perfect. Charles would have loved the idea that his cottage would serve to help other families. "I think that's a beautiful idea, darling. We can use some of the foundation's resources to maintain it, and I can oversee the program through my social work studies. Are you sure you want to turn our family sanctuary into that?" "The best sanctuaries are the ones that are shared. Your father always said a house isn't truly a home until it opens its doors to people who need love." He was right. We drove home that evening with a new project and a completely renewed relationship. We were no longer mother and daughter, united by obligation or need. We were two women who had consciously chosen to build a life together based on love, respect, and common purpose. That night, before falling asleep, I spoke to Charles in silence. We did it, my love. Our daughter finally understands what truly matters, and for the first time since his death, I felt he answered me. I always knew you would. You're both stronger than you think. 6 months had passed since that phone call in the doctor's waiting room. Sarah had transformed completely, and so had I. But there was still one final chapter to this story, one that would bring everything full circle and show Sarah the ultimate lesson about family, forgiveness, and the true meaning of wealth. Sarah, you're not that same daughter who left for Italy. You've become a woman who knows how to balance responsibility with love. I trust your judgment. Later that night, I stood on our porch looking at the stars. Sarah joined me, wrapping a blanket around my shoulders. Thank you, Mother. For what? For loving me enough to let me fail. For being strong enough to watch me struggle. For believing I could learn and grow. That's what real love does, darling. It doesn't always rescue. Sometimes it steps back and lets someone find their own strength. Dad knew that, didn't he? That's why he left those envelopes the way he did. Your father was a very wise man. He knew I'd need guidance on how to handle this situation. And you did it perfectly. We stood there together, mother and daughter, under the same stars Charles used to watch. The journey from that phone call in the doctor's office to this moment had been painful, complicated, and necessary. Sarah had learned that true wealth comes from character, not bank accounts. She'd learned that dignity comes from honest work, not material possessions. She'd learned that family isn't something to take for granted, but something to cherish and nurture every single day. And I had learned something too, that sometimes the hardest thing a mother can do is let her child struggle, knowing she has the power to make everything easy. Justice had arrived not as revenge, but as education. Not as punishment, but as transformation. The phone that had delivered such cruel words months ago now rang with Sarah calling to check on me during her lunch breaks. The daughter who had sold my cottage was now helping other women find safe homes. The relationship that had been broken by greed and thoughtlessness had been rebuilt on a foundation of mutual respect and genuine love. Mother? Sarah said quietly. Yes, darling. If you had to do it all over again, would you change anything? I thought about that question carefully, about the weeks of watching her suffer, about the nights I'd wanted to end the charade and just hold her, about all the pain we'd both endured. No, I said finally, because it brought us here. And here is exactly where we needed to be. She hugged me tight. I love you, Mother. The real you, not the vulnerable widow I thought you were, but the strong, wise woman you've always been. I love you too, Sarah, the woman you've become, not the girl you used to be. As we stood there under the stars, I felt Charles's presence more strongly than ever. His plan had worked perfectly, not just the financial provisions he'd made, but the emotional ones too. He'd known his daughter would need to be tested, and he'd trusted me to administer that test with love. The inheritance he'd left wasn't just money and property, it was wisdom, patience, and the courage to teach difficult lessons. And in the end, that was worth more than all the jewels, properties, and bank accounts combined. The end. Thank you for reading this story. I hope it reminded you that true love sometimes means allowing those we care about to face their own consequences, learn their own lessons, and find their own strength. The greatest gift we can give someone isn't solving their problems. It's believing they can solve them themselves. Which city are you reading from? Share your thoughts in the comments. If this story touched your heart, your support means everything and helps me bring more meaningful stories to life.